Got your Mac guys here on Birds 365. We are joined by our good buddy Les Bowen, who's got his camera all set and ready to hang with us. Les, how were your holidays?
Wonderful. How about you guys?
Very good. Thank you for asking.
Spectacular. Thanks for asking, Les. And, well, I guess we'll start with the obvious. Your thoughts on the Dallas game and how it unfolded. And, you know, from my perspective, I'm more concerned about the injuries than the actual loss. But I want to get your viewpoint on it.
Well, that's exactly how I feel. Not shocked that they lost. Irritated and surprised a little bit by the way they lost. I kind of thought if they lost, it would be because Gardner Minshew, hadn't really played all year in meaningful situations and, might not be up to the task of doing this in Dallas. He was fine. He played well enough to win. But the 4 turnovers, and 2 of them were interceptions, but I don't blame him for either one. I blame Quez Watkins.
Same here. Oof, got to fight for that football, Les.
Yeah, the 4 turnovers, the ridiculous 3rd down conversions, and 4th down, the 4th and 8, the 3rd and 30. This is something that we've seen before, and it had kind of been vanquished, I thought. Jonathan Gannon's defense ranks so high in all these categories, but if you can't stop a good team, when it matters, it doesn't really, you're not going to get to play against some of these teams that you've dominated in the playoffs. You're going to have to play good teams. And I was very unimpressed with the way the defense handled that, the zone defense thing. I was also, I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent here, but Nick Sirianni's press conference yesterday, he was asked about these things, Quez Watkins and the zone defense deal where, Dak Prescott was 24 for 24 against the zone, 3 for 11 against man. And Nick is a great guy, nicest man in the world, good coach. But they've gotten him to the point now, and I think this is from Howie Roseman and from the Eagles media relations staff. They got him to the point where he just won't answer anything.
I know.
He goes on these filibusters. If you ask him about the zone defense, he starts listing types of zone defenses. That's like Chip Kelly or something. That's just useless. We
did get a lot of cover 2, cover 4, cover 6.
Yeah, and then you have cover 5, and then of course there's cover 3. Just tell us, did you play too much zone? That's what we're asking here. Quez Watkins, does he need to be stronger on the ball? We don't want, the questioner meant well, but it was. There have been a certain number of interceptions involving Quez Watkins. And so Nick starts debating, let's see, the one in the Chicago game, I don't really remember, blah, 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 blah. No. The question is, does Quez Watkins need to be stronger on the ball? And why isn't he stronger on the ball? And you can't get a straight answer anymore out of the guy. And it's kind of, that's irritating to me as well.
All right, so Nick wouldn't admit it at yesterday's press conference. He can be a spin meister when he needs to. I'll ask you what I asked John in the first segment of the show. Gardner Minshew chose to throw the ball in the middle of the field to Quez Watkins.
Yeah.
Isn't that on the quarterback as much as it on the receiver who doesn't come away with a 50-50 ball? If you're throwing it to the guy and this wasn't some kind of revelation, oh my God, Quez Watkins is going to lose a 50-50 ball. No, we all knew that ahead of time, and he did it twice in the game on Saturday. Don't you look at the quarterback and or the play design to go, well, why are you even sending Quez into the middle of the field on a key play?
I would go along with the second part of that, Jody, the play design. With Gardner Minshew, he's going to do what they tell him to do. This is his first start of the year. I don't think he really has a real.
But hold on, on those plays, do you really believe that Quez is the first option? Quez on a slant is the first option on a play. I'm doubting that highly. I'm doubting that was Gardner.
I think we got frozen.
The ball there.
Yeah, there we go. Now I'm back, right?
Yeah, we
Okay.
got you, Les.
I don't think Gardner Minshew really knows these guys that intricately. I think they tell him, you throw to this receiver on this play.
Hold on. He's the backup quarterback of the Eagles. Why wouldn't he know him intimately? He's been there every single day this year, right?
Well, I don't think he really gets a lot of reps.
The backup doesn't get reps with the starters, Jody. He runs the scout
I just
team.
think, I think he's in a position where they tell him to throw the ball to this guy, he throws the ball to this guy. He's not going to take command of this and say, no, I'm going to throw it to somebody else. I think it's more on the coaches that they, and frankly, I didn't know going to this game that Quez Watkins was going to get out muscled for those two balls. I know, his forte is the long ball down the field, but other than that one interception against Chicago, I'm not sure I really knew that he couldn't, stand up for himself on a ball over the middle. That is something they really need to address with Aaron Moorhead, the receivers coach, and Shane Steichen, the offensive coordinator. Why is this happening? Why can't this guy do this? It's not like he's 5'2" and 150 pounds or something. What's the deal on this? But yeah, that was really irritating. It was they lost for reasons that were within their control, I think, was the thing that probably bothered most people. It wasn't because Jalen Hurts was injured. It might have been a little bit because Devonta Maddox was injured on the zone defense thing. But they lost a game they could have won. And if they had won it, things would look a lot simpler right now in terms of what they do going forward with all these injuries.
Yeah. I would say to Jody's point, I mean, you're right, Les, that Gardner, is going to do what he's told, but there are progressions. Maybe he got off his first progression and got to Quez in that aspect. But, at the end of the day, if you're the quarterback and somebody's out there, you got to be able to trust if you throw the football. And they weren't great throws. I'm not trying to dismiss any culpability from Gardner Minshew, but I'm just saying, if you have a backup quarterback in the game, the thought process for the rest of the team is almost you have to elevate. You have to help the guy a little bit. He's not the starter. And if the ball's coming your way, you got to fight for it. It doesn't matter if you're A.J. Brown. We talk about Devonta Smith and his weight since he came in. And I don't know if we have frozen less or
I think
Les.
I'm back now.
There
we
are.
Said it. Yeah, I don't know what's going on with this. But
so I don't know if you heard that, Les, but, if a guy's on the field and Nick Sirianni's jumping on the sword to protect him, oh, no, Quez doesn't have an issue. He's got to fight for the football. That's part of the gig, in my estimation, Jody. I think we lost Les again.
Yeah, he's freezing up on us again. And yeah, I'm not looking to give Quez Watkins a free pass. Shame on him that he didn't fight more hard for the ball. I'm just saying that it was a combined effort. I think Gardner's getting more of a free pass than Quez Watkins is, and I don't agree with that. I think they both should share in the culpability of that. And those two balls certainly were ones that the Eagles could have come down with. And two balls on the ground, Les. Two fumbles Saturday in the game that Eagle players had their hands on, and neither one came up with. Dak fumble, Linval Joseph basically had it. How he lost it, I'm not sure. The Miles Sanders fumble, Jack Driscoll had it in his hands. He just couldn't come up with it. 50-50 balls decide games. And the Eagles, through Nick Sirianni, talk all the time about, we got to win the turnover battle. We can't give up chunk plays. We'll get to the chunk plays, 3rd and 30, in just a second. But how much was it disheartening that the Eagles lost the 50-50 balls in that game to the Cowboys?
Well, the whole turnover thing has really flipped in the second half of the season. I think Reuben Frank from NBC 10 and, and some other people have made a chart of that. The Eagles were leading the league in turnover margin, and they've been the worst in the league for over the last several weeks.
I think it's week one through week 9. They were obviously they were first in the league coming into this week, but they were really spectacular. And then week 10 through week 16, worst, 32nd in the league.
Yeah, some of that is, maybe they were a little lucky in some of those early games, and that evens out the bounces, but I did a little bit of a study of this several weeks ago. The number of turnovers you get is kind of random. It has to do with the quarterbacks you're playing, and luck. But teams' turnover margin isn't all that random. If you look at it at the end of the year and look at this year's stats, last year's stats, year before that, it tends to be some of the same teams. There are teams that take care of the ball. That part of it you do control. The part where somebody throws you an interception, maybe you don't control. But the part of it where you have the ball and that part you do control, and it's really maddening that they've suddenly got into this habit of losing the ball, and both running backs. That Boston Scott had like 3 snaps or something Saturday, and he lost the ball on them. And he's a reliable guy. It was kind of a silly loss, and it's I'm sure from a fan's point of view, it's allowing the Dallas fans, to crow about how they won this game, and, it proves this and it proves that and it proves the other thing. And it was just, other than Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb, I didn't see much out of Dallas at all that I thought was that impressive.
No, Dallas gave up 355 passing yards to a backup quarterback.
Yes.
And that was with some mistakes mixed in. And they've struggled pretty mightily since they lost their second corner, Anthony Brown. But from the Eagles, the ball security standpoint, because I've asked I've asked Nick this question. I've asked Jonathan Gannon this question from the defensive perspective. And they hate that term luck. They hate it. Yeah, we rep this, Les. We rep it.
It exists, though,
Yeah, oh, yeah, it exists. This proves it exists.
Yeah.
Week 1 through 9, you're off the charts. Week 10 through 16, you're worst in the NFL. If that doesn't prove it, I don't know what proves it. Boston Scott, though, you're right. He's a reliable guy. But I've always questioned this, Les. You go all the way back to week 1 in Detroit. That first game. Boston doesn't play. All of a sudden, in the fourth quarter, he's getting 3 straight carries in the biggest aspect of the game. I've never understood their usage pattern with the running backs, and it finally jumped up and bit them. Boston doesn't play, screws up the mesh point with a backup quarterback. So remember, he's typically working that play with Jalen Hurts.
Right.
It finally jumped up and bit him a little bit.
Good point. And I noticed that earlier in the game, if you remember very early, first or second touchdown drive, they ended up with Kenny Gainwell in goal line.
Yeah.
I guess because it was his turn. And they were trying to run Kenny Gainwell up the middle in short yardage. And finally, Minshew had to get it himself. That wasn't a Kenny Gainwell situation. But somehow it was the rotation ended up being with him being the ball carrier. Yeah, that's a very good point. We don't know who, in the old days, Deuce Staley decided what running back was in on what down. We don't know how that is done today.
All right, time for a little role play. And I'll ask each of you to play the role of the Philadelphia Eagles head coach, Nick Sirianni. One of the questions I would have liked to see him get asked was, if we can all agree and stipulate that the Eagles work less than the Eagles used to work. Most everybody in the NFL does. It's certainly collectively bargained. You can't have massive 3-hour practices and the like. But even within the limitations of the CBA, the Eagles work less than other teams. That's their MO. That's what they've decided. That's what they've done. And when they weren't dealing with injuries, we had to give them credit. Hey, maybe the Eagles know better than everybody else. So my question to Coach would be, Coach, can we now say that the work less means safer and healthier players has gone out the window because of the spate of injuries that you'd have had over the last couple of weeks? He can't give as an answer, well, there's randomness and luck to that. No, there's not. You don't acknowledge randomness and luck, coach. You say it's all in reps. Well, you're doing less reps. Is it fair to question the Eagles doing less to protect their players isn't working because they're getting key players injured at the most important time of the year? What do you say, coach?
I hadn't really thought about that, but I don't know that there's enough evidence over the last few weeks to make the whole thing moot. They have had some injuries here over the course of the season, though.
Yeah, I think we
froze up.
Froze
all
last.
right, you step in and play the part of Jonathan of Nick Sirianni. How do you get away with answering that question without going to randomness or luck?
Well, he does use luck for injuries, so he could default to that. But you can't rep injuries. You can't not rep injuries. But I would say, and I think that's where Les was going. But I'll let Les speak for himself. Over the whole season, they're still, above the mean when it comes to injuries compared to other teams. So they've had a better season than most teams. But I'll let Les jump in.
Yeah, that is exactly what I was going to say. I think they still don't have as many season-ending injuries as most teams, but it is, it's a long season, and there's no philosophy that's going to inculcate you against some injuries. But the injuries are a very big concern here at this point. It's a bad time to be suffering these really kind of open-ended, we don't know where they're going kind of injuries.
Well, one I want to jump specifically to is Lane Johnson for this reason. We all know. I mean, Lane's been unfortunately out enough over the years to see the difference when he's on the field and off the field. So you have that aspect of it. But here's my other concern, Les. People are saying Jalen Hurts should get back on the field. Your all-pro right tackle is now injured. And if there's any gray area with Jalen Hurts, that changes my thinking. Does it change your thinking that Lane's not out there?
Well, I just think you have a 24-year-old quarterback, and that's his throwing shoulder. You're not talking about his pinky or his ankle or something like that. I think you take every precaution with Jalen Hurts' throwing shoulder. If there's the way it was explained to me by a doctor who has treated these injuries is I forget which one was anterior and which one was posterior, but if you re-injure it and it gets knocked this way, it's probably okay. But if it gets knocked the other way, it can damage nerves and all kinds of stuff. You don't want to mess with that. I know this is all very important, but you don't want to mess with that and Jalen Hurts' throwing shoulder. I'm sorry. There's nothing that's that important. But not having Lane Johnson really ups the ante on that. And even looking at it aside from Jalen Hurts' injury, not having Lane Johnson makes them a much less formidable playoff opponent if it comes to that. And we don't know, they said yesterday they were hoping to have him back for the playoffs. And I saw people on social media jumping all over that like, oh, he'll be back for the playoffs. Oh, it'll all be fine. We have no idea.
No.
I hope that's the case.
You know what I fear less? The dreaded sports hernia.
Yeah.
That's and Lane is topping up, and I told Jody, Lane is topping up that he's going to try to play.
Right.
But we've seen guys try to play through that injury.
Will he be effective?
Yeah.
That's the thing. You have to have your core. If you have a back or a groin or core injury, power, explosiveness, things like that go out the window. And that's what makes him a good player. It's not because he's, 360 like Jordan Mailata, because he isn't. It's his athleticism. And if he can't have that, then they're in a little bit of trouble.
Here's where the rubber hits the road, so to speak. If they lose this week to the Saints, which neither John or I think it's going to happen, but you can't just write it in ink just yet that it's a W. But if you lose, then you really need to win that last game of the season. They've already made the playoffs. They're in the playoffs. If you just say, hey, you got to get in the playoffs. Well, they've already accomplished that. But there is a huge difference between being the number 1 seed and the number 5 seed. Maybe the Cowboys do a solid to them and lose earlier, and they don't have to sweat it then. And that gives you another week of rest for Lane Johnson. Does the difference between playing week 1 in the playoffs and not playing in week 1 in the playoffs play into the decision they make whether Jalen Hurts goes or not? If he's that 90% guy, and not 100, not 75, he's in that middle ground, do you allow for some wiggle room there with the difference between winning the division and not?
To me, only if it's clear that he can't, that he's so well healed that he can't worsen this injury, and really mess himself up.
You're not factoring any risk in for the importance, the magnitude of that game to beat the Giants if they lose to the Saints.
Not risk in terms of, disaster. No. I mean, if he's not here for the playoffs, I don't think 2017 is happening again. I don't think they're going to win the Super Bowl with Gardner Minshew. If there's a danger of his right shoulder, getting worse, and maybe there isn't, I don't know. I have no idea. But if there's a danger that he can really mess up his right shoulder, no, you don't play him. Like you said, they're in the playoffs. I mean, it would be better to have the extra week. It would be vital to have the extra week. But you're talking about Jalen Hurts' right shoulder here, I mean, I keep saying that.
Another injury that is perhaps even more serious, because you got to parse through these things, as you know, Les. And the term with Devonta Maddox was indefinitely, which is worse than hopeful.
Yeah.
And he was spotted in a walking boot after the game, another not good sign. If I were a betting man, I would not expect to see Devonta Maddox in that first round of the playoffs, wherever it is, whether you get the extra week or not. They didn't handle it well in game in Dallas. Now, he had missed 4 games with the hamstring earlier. Josiah Scott had some ups and downs. The Eagles have to start thinking about moving pieces around, moving parts around to deal with the absence of Devonta Maddox.
Yeah, it was kind of weird. Devonta was all over the TV screen the first.
He was playing a great game.
That game, he was like the most visible player on the Eagles defense. He did let Dak out of his grasp there for a key conversion one time, but he was playing very, very well. And suddenly, when he was gone, it was open season in the middle of the field. I guess you have to hope that C.J. Gardner-Johnson comes back healthy and helps that situation. And maybe Josiah Scott is more effective with CJ in there than Reed Blankenship. But that's another thing we don't know. And in fact, Nick Sirianni, I kind of winced a little bit about what he said yesterday about CJ Gardner-Johnson. He didn't say, oh, he's great, he's fine, he's wonderful, and we'll be out there and he'll be practicing. This is a lacerated kidney. And just because it's been 4 weeks doesn't mean that he's ready to play. They kind of need him, I think. Certainly maybe not to beat the Saints, but the Saints have won a couple games here, and you're talking about, you're going to rest this guy and you can't play this guy. And, you get to a point where suddenly this game gets a little dicey if you're talking about too many guys.
I think Tom Brady helped the Eagles a little bit, because I think the Saints would have had a lot of hope if the Bucs lost that game. Right. But here comes Tom Brady. Wins
who only plays like the last few minutes and the overtime anymore. The rest of the game, he's terrible. It's like he's in the NBA or something.
All right, so let me get you on the record with this. We know that Devonta Maddox indefinitely means certainly the rest of the regular season and maybe significantly longer thereafter. But Lane Johnson and C.J. Gardner-Johnson, the Johnson brothers, Johnson & Johnson, are to be determined. Do you handle them in the same way? Do you hold them to the same standards of not risking further injury the same way you do with Jalen Hurts?
Probably not. Now, it depends on that. I mean, a lacerated kidney, I mean, certainly you don't want to mess with that. I mean, I think that's the sort of thing that he has to be, the tests have to show that it's healed before he plays. I think it would be irresponsible to play somebody with a lacerated kidney. The Lane Johnson thing, they can probably shoot him up, and I don't know. Like we were saying earlier, he can try to play with it. He's 30-some years old. You're not looking at a guy who's got his whole career ahead of him, and you're risking some horrible, thing here. He's played with injuries before. He's had surgeries before. I have a different attitude toward him a little bit, in that the position he plays and the type of injury it is, you're probably not looking at doing anything to him that's going to resound through the years or anything like that. So yeah, I think there's a good chance Lane shows up and tries to play, as John said, in the playoffs. I don't know whether that means he'll be good. The CJ Gardner-Johnson, yeah, you just have to see if a lacerated kidney is healed.
At Les Bowen on Twitter. You can follow Les there, read his Eagles musings on Facebook these days. Still does a tremendous job breaking down the games and such. I'll leave you with this, Les. I do think, whether it's by the Cowboys losing a game, the Vikings losing a game, people forget that part of the equation.
Yes.
Those teams have to win out. I think the Eagles are going to get that number 1 seed. And if they do, they are set up like 2017. They only got to win 2 games at home to get to the Super Bowl. Anybody of concern that you think that could come into Lincoln Financial Field in difficult weather, difficult environment, that could pull it off and stop the Eagles, even with all these injuries?
Yeah.
I assume Jalen's going to be there, but
Right.
Anybody scare you?
The team, I think the Lane Johnson thing suddenly makes San Francisco a lot more scary with that defensive line. I was not, a team playing its third quarterback. I was kind of, regardless of how well he's played right now.
Yeah, typically you
as
write that team off, but you can't write off San Francisco. It's pretty amazing. In fact, I think we lost Les one more time. In fact, Jody, they're a little bit better since Brock Purdy's
Oh, yeah.
come in. I'm amazed. I'm amazed that they've been a little bit better. That's what I thought was going to happen with Trey Lance, and it's happened with Brock Purdy. The 49ers have gotten a little bit better, Les. It's amazing.
Yeah, and, I don't know what to make of that. The teams they're playing, I don't know. But I do think without Lane Johnson, suddenly San Francisco looks like a tougher task than it looked before. And, I just don't know some of these other teams, you don't know what to make of them. I really don't think. Again, Dallas, I'd be shocked if with Jalen Hurts healthy and, some kind of help in the middle, Gardner Johnson, hopefully. I'd be shocked if the Eagles couldn't handle Dallas here in a playoff game. But San Francisco, I worry about. Yeah.
And Brock Purdy's 3 games as a starter for the 49ers, quarterback ratings, passer ratings, 134, 117, 114.
Mm-hmm.
The Eagles' backup quarterback coming off the bench put up an 84 the other day. So, sometimes guys can come off the bench despite the fact that he's not getting any reps out there in San Francisco. He was capable of stepping in and performing to a higher level than Gardner Minshew did. So there is absolutely reason to give respect, if not fear, to the San Francisco 49ers. Less good stuff. Appreciate you coming on board. Always a pleasure, buddy. We will certainly be getting you back on come playoff time. Thanks for jumping in with us today.
Good to talk to you. Take care, guys. Happy New Year.
Thank you, Les.
Our pleasure.
Happy New Year.
Another guy I'm jealous of because he gets to wear a green shirt. because he's not in front of a green screen. So he gets to wear, and Dama wears green, and all our guests wear green. And McMullen and I go to the dark T-shirt basically on a day in.
Johnny Cash, baby. Johnny Cash.
Yeah,
got to go with the Johnny Cash wardrobe.
Johnny Cash working. All right, McMullen and McDonald, your Mac and Mac guys coming back. More to break down from the Eagles and the Cowboys and the overall NFC. Coming up in less than 25 minutes. We will talk to Chris Franklin from NJ.com, who jumps on with us usually day after an Eagle game. It's a couple days after. Yeah. For those of you complaining about us not being 365 on the stream, yeah, we took a couple days off. Did you really want us to come on here and point out where the Eagles came up short against the Cowboys? We let it breathe a little bit, but we're breaking it down for you now here on Birds 365.